was just past 8 p.m. when I walked into the house, my boots still caked with dust from the job site, shoulders sore from another 12-hour day. I wasn't expecting much, just a hot meal, maybe a smile, a little warmth from the woman I built this life with. But instead, I got silence. Emma sat on the couch, her legs tucked under a plush designer blanket, eyes glued to her phone, scrolling through some influencer's vacation in Tulum. I stood there for a second, waiting for her to even acknowledge me. Nothing. Finally, I cleared my throat and said, "Hey. I miss how we used to be." She didn't even look up. "I'm not here to fulfill your desires, Jason." That was it. No hesitation. No softness. Just cold, flat words that sliced through the air like a blade. And in that moment, something inside me shattered. I didn't respond right away, couldn't, honestly. I just stood there, staring at her, trying to figure out if I heard her right. My ears were ringing, like someone had set off a grenade in my chest. Fulfill my desires? Was that really what she thought this was all about? That I was just some needy husband begging for sex or attention? I wasn't asking for the world, I was asking for connection, for love, for a goddamn reminder that I mattered in this house. My mind scrambled for answers, trying to make sense of how we got here. This was the woman I once held so tightly in bed, whispering dreams about our future. Now she couldn't even look me in the eye. I wasn't angry yet. Not really. I was just stunned. Numb. Like I'd been sucker punched by the one person I never thought would swing at me. I looked around the living room, and suddenly everything felt surreal. The velvet throw pillows she bought last month, $1.90 apiece. The wine rack stocked with bottles I couldn't pronounce. The rug beneath her feet imported from somewhere halfway across the world. All of it paid for by my calloused hands, my aching back, my 60-hour work weeks. While I climbed scaffolding under the Texas sun, she lounged in yoga pants and spa robes, sipping $6 lattes and writing captions about self-love and knowing your worth. Meanwhile, she hadn't cooked in weeks, hadn't folded a damn towel, hadn't even asked me how my day was in God knows how long. But she knew how to Venmo me for her half of the takeout I didn't ask for, in a house I paid for. I built this life brick by brick, and somehow ended up feeling like a stranger in it. That night, I didn't fight. I didn't yell. I just sat in the dark, staring at the ceiling while she scrolled TikTok in the next room. I kept thinking, how the hell did we end up here? When did love become a transaction? When did marriage become one-sided labor? And more importantly, how long had I been too blind to see it? I'd given her everything, my time, my effort, my soul, and now she couldn't even be bothered to give me decency. So I ask you, what would you do if the person you loved emotionally abandoned you, yet still lived comfortably off your sweat? Would you stay and hope things change, or would you reclaim your dignity and walk away from someone who forgot your value? That was the moment I realized something had to give. She said she wouldn't fulfill my desires, but I was done funding her fantasy. Thank you for listening, brother. If this hit you deep, drop a 1 in the comments. Share your story below. Like if you've ever felt unseen. Subscribe for more real talk. Share this video with a brother who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, one story can remind a man of his worth. Looking back now, it's strange how something so broken could have started out so beautifully. I met Emma on a routine delivery job, just another day, another supply run to the university campus where a new science wing was under construction. I was in a sweat-soaked work shirt, unloading lumber off the flatbed when I caught her eye. She was standing under a shaded walkway, talking to a friend, laughing, one of those light, airy laughs that makes people turn their heads. When our eyes met, I didn't think anything of it at first. She was polished, confident, glowing in a way that didn't belong in a construction zone. But to my surprise, she walked over, asked if I was the one delivering the beams, and made a comment about how rare it was to see someone actually doing physical work on campus. She wasn't flirting, at least not obviously, but something clicked. And that's how it began. At the time, I didn't think I was anyone special. just a working-class guy from the outskirts of San Antonio, raised by a single dad who worked nights at a fabrication plant and spent weekends fixing up old trucks. We weren't poor, but nothing ever came easy. I started working summers at the local hardware store when I was 15 and went straight into trade school after high school. College wasn't in the cards, not when bills were due and tools had to be bought. I clawed my way through construction jobs, slowly earning respect the old-fashioned way, showing up early, working late, keeping my head down, and taking pride in every inch of what I built. I wasn't flashy. I didn't have a fancy degree or a trust fund. But I was dependable. I was solid. And for a long time, I believed that was enough. I believed that's what love respected. Emma, on the other hand, came from a different world. Her father was a regional bank executive, her mother a corporate event planner. She grew up in a neighborhood with manicured lawns, summer camps, and BMWs in every driveway. She studied business and marketing, with a minor in psychology. She used to joke that it helped her understand people's buying behavior. She talked a lot about breaking the glass ceiling, about building her brand, about being her own boss someday. At first, I admired that drive. She always spoke with certainty, like the world was already hers, and she just hadn't picked out which part she wanted yet. But under all that ambition, there was something else I didn't see clearly at the time, an obsession with status, image, and appearances. She didn't want success to build something. She wanted success to wear it, to display it. But I wouldn't see that until much later. Still, I fell for her, hard. Maybe it was because she saw something in me no one else had. Or maybe it was because, deep down, I wanted to believe I was finally good enough for someone like her. She made me feel like I wasn't just a guy in work boots, I was a man building a life. I mistook her attention for affection. I confused admiration for love. In the early days, she'd laugh at my jokes, ask about my projects, and say things like, "I love how grounded you are." It felt like balance, me, the anchor, her, the vision. But what I didn't realize was that she didn't love my steadiness, she loved the stability I could offer. She wasn't interested in walking beside me, she was interested in what she could stand on top of. And I was too blinded by hope to notice the cracks forming beneath my feet. It's strange, looking back, how the most beautiful disasters often start with something that feels so right. The day I met Emma, there was nothing special about the weather, the job, or even my mood. I was just another guy hauling lumber onto a university campus under a blistering Texas sun, sweat bleeding through my shirt, boots coated in dust. That's when I saw her, standing in the shade outside a brick building, mid-laugh, radiant in a way that didn't quite belong among forklifts and steel beams. When our eyes met, I didn't expect anything beyond a polite nod. But she walked over, asked if I was delivering the beams, and cracked a joke about how rare it was to see someone doing real work on campus. It was small talk, but it stuck. That was the first spark, the kind that lights slowly, quietly, before you ever realize you're standing next to a wildfire. Before Emma, my world was simple, honest. I grew up in a modest home on the edge of San Antonio, raised by a father who worked second shifts and taught me everything I needed to know about grit and integrity. We didn't have much, but we never lacked the things that really mattered: food on the table, calloused hands, and a clear sense of what it meant to earn your place. I started working early, part-time at the local hardware store at 15, then into construction right after high school. I skipped college not because I wasn't smart, but because I didn't have the luxury of waiting to earn. I poured concrete, framed walls, fixed what others called junk. My pride came not from fancy degrees or titles, but from watching something I built stand strong against wind and time. I never craved status. I just wanted to build something worth coming home to. Emma's world, though, was a different universe altogether. She came from polished dinner parties, prep schools, and a house where image mattered more than warmth. Her father was a regional banking executive, and her mother ran upscale corporate events. Everything about her was groomed to impress: her resume, her wardrobe, even the way she talked about life, like it was a brand to manage rather than a journey to live. She studied marketing and business psychology. She called it understanding influence. Her ambitions sounded impressive, at least on paper. She talked about launching her own lifestyle brand, becoming a speaker, making waves in the corporate world. I believed her at first. But beneath the surface, it wasn't about impact or innovation. It was about appearance, approval, aesthetics. She didn't want to change the world, she wanted to look like she had. I didn't see that then. I saw potential. Now I know better. But back then, all I saw was someone who made me feel seen. Maybe that's why I fell for her so hard. She had a way of making a man feel like he mattered, like he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. I mistook her curiosity for connection, her charm for depth. She'd ask about my projects, listen when I talked about my work, even called my hands that build legacies. And I held on to that. I thought she appreciated what I brought to the table, that my strength and discipline were the foundation she wanted to build her dreams on. What I didn't realize was she wasn't admiring the man, I was just the scaffolding she planned to climb. I confused her fascination with affection. And by the time I started to see the cracks, I'd already convinced myself they could be patched. That's how illusions work, beautiful until they collapse. At first, I thought it was just a transitional phase. Marriage changes people, everyone says that. Maybe she just needed time to adjust, to find her footing. After we got married, Emma took a job at a mid-sized marketing firm, nothing big, but respectable. She was excited in the beginning, came home talking about campaigns and pitch meetings. But that excitement fizzled out faster than I expected. 3 months in, she quit, saying her boss didn't respect her potential and that making coffee for client meetings was beneath her. I didn't push back. I wanted to be supportive. I told her she deserved better, that something more suited to her talents would come along. But what followed wasn't job hunting, it was brunches, shopping trips, and endless hours scrolling through social media. One gig after another came and went. A receptionist job. A project coordinator contract. Each one lasted barely a season, each exit blamed on sexism, office drama, or a toxic work culture. I started to realize Emma wasn't looking for a career. She was looking for a lifestyle, and she expected me to finance it. While her ambition faded, my responsibilities multiplied. I was climbing the ranks at my firm, promoted from site supervisor to assistant project manager, then to lead coordinator. The paychecks grew, but so did the hours. Some weeks I was clocking 65 hours, plus travel time. I'd come home with muscles sore, shirt damp with sweat, the scent of sawdust still clinging to my skin. And each time I stepped through the door, all I wanted was peace, maybe a warm meal, a little conversation, even just acknowledgement. Instead, I'd find Emma sprawled on the leather couch, watching reality shows about rich housewives and influencers, surrounded by shopping bags from stores I couldn't even pronounce. And worse, she wasn't just spending more, she was expecting more. "This kitchen needs an upgrade," she'd say, pointing at our perfectly functional counters. "I deserve a soaking tub," she'd argue while scrolling through bathroom inspiration boards. She talked about renovations like they were necessities, not luxuries. And the irony? I manage construction projects for a living, but somehow, she insisted we needed expensive contractors to do it all. Not once did it cross her mind that maybe I was too exhausted to be her personal builder after a 14-hour day. As the months rolled by, the gap between us widened. It wasn't just emotional, it became physical too. We'd once been close, affectionate, alive. But now, intimacy felt transactional, a chore she reluctantly agreed to only when she wanted something, usually a shopping spree or a new piece of furniture. It was like I'd become a walking wallet, a background character in a lifestyle she curated for Instagram. And the worst part? The smallest gestures I once took for granted, her hugging me when I came home, asking how my day was, cooking dinner once in a while, those disappeared completely. Instead, dinner came in brown takeout bags, and when I asked about it, she'd shrug and say, "You can Venmo me for your half." I laughed the first time. Then I realized she was serious. She expected me to pay her back for meals she ordered, in a house I paid for, from a fridge I stocked. I tried to talk to her about it, tried to explain how I felt more like a tenant than a husband. But every time, she rolled her eyes and tossed buzzwords at me like confetti: patriarchy, emotional labor, gender roles. I wasn't asking for a servant, I just wanted a partner. And somewhere along the way, I'd lost her. It didn't happen overnight. The feeling crept in slowly, like water soaking through drywall, silent, steady, corrosive. At first, I told myself I was just tired. That I was overthinking things. That maybe I'd gotten too caught up in the stress of work to see clearly. But the truth was harder to ignore each day. I'd come home, set my boots by the door, sit down at the table with nothing but silence echoing back. Emma would be buried in her phone or in some overpriced skincare routine she'd ordered that week, and I'd sit there wondering when I became invisible in my own home. Still, I tried to convince myself it was normal, that all couples go through rough patches. I told myself she was just in a funk, that she'd bounce back. I minimized what I felt, buried my disappointment under a pile of rationalizations. She's just stressed. She's finding herself. She'll come around. But deep down, something darker was sinking in, an ache I couldn't name at the time. A quiet truth whispering louder by the day: you're not her partner anymore, you're just her provider. Others started noticing long before I was ready to admit it. My buddy Carlos mentioned it during a beer run one Saturday, just a passing comment, but it stuck. "Man, your wife ever do anything for you, or is it all one way?" I laughed it off, said something like, "She's just going through a phase." But it didn't stop there. My older sister, Rachel, brought it up after Emma skipped my birthday dinner to go to a wellness retreat with her friends. "Jason," she said carefully, "you deserve someone who gives as much as you do." I brushed her off too, called her dramatic. I didn't want anyone thinking my marriage was falling apart. Hell, I didn't want to think it myself. I kept defending Emma, even when it felt like I was defending a ghost. I clung to the memory of who she used to be, hoping she'd resurface. But each time I tried to explain away her coldness, her absence, her growing sense of entitlement, it felt more like I was lying to myself. I was protecting an illusion, and every time someone poked a hole in it, I patched it up with denial. Emma, on the other hand, had an explanation for everything. Any time I tried to open up, tried to tell her how disconnected I felt, she deflected with jargon and buzzwords that sounded more like rehearsed slogans than real conversation. "Do you know how much emotional labor I carry in this relationship?" she'd say, tossing her hair and adjusting her silk robe like a character in a self-help podcast. When I'd bring up the mess around the house, or the fact that we hadn't had a real conversation in weeks, she'd talk about burnout and the mental toll of being a woman in a male-dominated world. She said she was recharging. Practicing self-care. Creating space for her energy. Once, when I asked why she never cooked anymore, she snapped, "Do I look like your 1950s housewife?" It wasn't just dismissive, it was condescending. And the worst part was, I started to believe her. I started to wonder if maybe I was the problem. Maybe I'd become too traditional, too demanding. But somewhere inside me, a quiet voice was starting to stir, one that didn't care about gender roles or empowerment hashtags. One that simply wanted to feel valued again. The moment I'd been working toward for years finally came on an unassuming Friday afternoon. After months of pulling double shifts, negotiating impossible deadlines, and managing one of the firm's largest development projects downtown, my boss called me into his office. He shook my hand, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You've earned it, senior project manager starts next quarter. Full salary bump, bonus included." I felt a rush of pride I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just a title, it was proof that all the late nights, early mornings, and blood-stained calluses weren't for nothing. On my way home, I picked up Emma's favorite dessert from that little Italian place we used to love, thinking maybe, just maybe, this could be the night we reconnect. Maybe a quiet dinner, some laughter, a toast to a future that finally looked a little brighter. I pulled into the driveway a bit earlier than usual, a hopeful nervousness building in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had something worth sharing. But I had no idea that the moment I walked through that door, everything I'd been holding onto would come crashing down. I stepped inside, smiling like an idiot, carrying a box of tiramisu and a bottle of wine. "Babe, I've got some amazing news," I called out, expecting her to come around the corner, curious, excited. She barely glanced up from the couch. "Oh, you're home early," she muttered, eyes fixed on her phone. I held up the dessert, still trying. "Thought we could celebrate. The downtown project came in under budget. I got promoted, senior project manager." She blinked slowly, like I'd just told her I bought new windshield wipers. "That's nice," she said flatly. "So, do you think we can use your bonus for something important?" I paused, the smile fading. "Like what?" She lit up in a way she hadn't for anything I'd done in months. "There's this feminist networking panel in Miami next weekend. All the big names will be there. Tickets are pricey, but it's a big opportunity for me." I stood there, stunned. She didn't ask how I felt. She didn't say congratulations. She saw my promotion as a line item on her shopping list. And the worst part? She didn't even try to pretend otherwise. Still holding the box of dessert in my hands, I set it down on the coffee table, right beside her pile of shopping bags. "Emma," I said carefully, "do you even realize what this means for us? I've spent years busting my ass to build a future, and all you can talk about is another trip?" She looked up then, slowly, with a smirk I hadn't seen before. "Jason," she said, "you act like I owe you something just because you work all the time. I never asked you to." My jaw clenched. "I'm not asking for much. I just wanted to share this with you. Maybe have a nice dinner. Just feel like we're still in this together." Her voice dropped cold and sharp. "I'm not here to fulfill your desires." There it was. The words that split everything in two. I stared at her, heart pounding, not out of rage, but realization. She didn't just say it in frustration. She meant it. She was telling me exactly how she saw me, a man expected to provide without question, without emotion, without reciprocation. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. It was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know how far it would go yet. After that night, things didn't go back to normal, and honestly, I didn't want them to. Something had shifted in me, something subtle but irreversible. I stopped trying to talk to her. I stopped coming home with hope in my chest. I started watching more closely, paying attention to things I used to brush off. The way Emma would leave her phone face down when I walked into the room. The sudden late-night showers, the vague explanations about where she'd been, the overly rehearsed laughs on her calls. I wanted to believe I was just paranoid, just overreacting to the emotional blow she'd dealt me. But deep down, I knew better. I've worked construction long enough to know what cracks in a foundation look like. At first, they're small, hairline fractures. But if you don't fix them, they spread, and eventually, the whole damn structure collapses. And this marriage? It was already buckling under the weight of everything unspoken. I didn't have solid proof of anything, yet. But my gut, the same gut that kept me safe on job sites all these years, told me I wasn't just dealing with emotional neglect anymore. Something deeper was going on. I just didn't expect it to cut as deep as it did. What happened next wasn't the result of some grand investigation. It was dumb luck, accidental timing. I was sitting in the garage one evening, nursing a beer, trying to cool my head, when I noticed the blinking light on the corner security camera. I'd installed it months ago after some tools had gone missing from the garage. Normally, I never bothered to check the footage, it was more for peace of mind than anything else. But that night, on a hunch, I opened the app on my phone and started scrolling through old clips. And then I saw it. A timestamp from the previous Thursday. Emma wasn't supposed to be home that afternoon, said she was visiting her friend Jessica. But the footage told a different story. I watched the frame load, and there it was, clear as day, my cousin Marcus walking up our driveway, checking over his shoulder, and entering through the side door. A door only Emma had the key to. I paused the clip, replayed it 3 times just to be sure. Same face. Same leather jacket I bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. Marcus. My cousin. The same kid I helped get a job last summer when he was broke and sleeping on his buddy's couch. I wish I could say I exploded, that I screamed, punched a wall, did something dramatic. But I didn't. I just sat there in silence, watching the screen, the beer bottle still cold in my hand, untouched. My stomach dropped like a sinking weight, and my fingers started to tremble. It wasn't just Emma, it was Marcus. Blood. Family. The kid I used to take fishing when he was little. The guy I vouched for when everyone else said he was flaky. I gave him everything I could. And apparently, that included my wife. The betrayal hit different. It wasn't loud, it was hollow. Empty. Like the air had been knocked out of me without anyone throwing a punch. Suddenly, every weird moment from the past few months came rushing back, the secret of smiles, the unexplained charges on our joint account, the late-night texts Emma swore were just group chats. I didn't have the whole picture yet, but I'd seen enough. Enough to know that my loyalty had been wasted. That the woman I shared a bed with, and the cousin I once called a brother, had been playing me for a fool. And for the first time, I stopped feeling sad, and started feeling cold. Strangely enough, after the shock wore off, I didn't feel rage. Not the kind people expect, anyway. No yelling. No smashing things. Just a steady, eerie stillness that settled over me like a second skin. That night, while Emma slept just a few feet away in her bedroom, unaware that I knew everything, I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the air conditioner and the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I didn't want revenge, not in the way most men would. I wanted clarity. Control. I'd spent too long reacting to things, her moods, her manipulations, her coldness. Now, I needed to act. Not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. I wasn't going to let my emotions drive this. I was going to handle it the way I handle my projects, systematically. Quietly. With precision. No more begging for affection. No more trying to fix what she'd already shattered. I'd given her enough grace. Now, it was time to pull the thread and watch everything unravel, on my terms. The next morning, I got up before sunrise and made myself coffee like I always did. Only this time, instead of heading to the job site early, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and opened our bank statements. I hadn't looked closely in months. Work had kept me too busy, and I'd let Emma handle most of the day-to-day spending, not because I trusted her judgment, but because I was too damn exhausted to micromanage. But as I scrolled through line after line of charges, the pattern hit me like a brick. $600 here for a business consultation, $1,200 there at a boutique tech firm. Recurring transfers to an account I didn't recognize, small amounts at first, then bigger ones. I pulled up a secondary credit card I rarely used and found it had been maxed out months ago. I felt a pit form in my stomach. This wasn't just careless spending. This was intentional. Deliberate. And there was more. I cross-referenced names on payment apps, invoices, even Venmo descriptions. One of them made my blood run cold, equipment from Marcus. There it was, in black and white. The betrayal wasn't just emotional or physical anymore. It was financial. The more I dug, the clearer it became Emma wasn't just having an affair. She was bankrolling it. She'd been siphoning money from our accounts for months, funneling it into what she called investments, but in reality, they were loans to Marcus. Loans I never agreed to. Loans she never intended to repay. I found emails, receipts, even a business proposal with my name listed under initial funding support. I nearly choked. She'd used my promotion, my sweat, my sacrifice, to prop up her lover's pipe dream. Marcus didn't even have a real plan, just some half-baked idea about starting a niche digital brand that never made it past the buzzword phase. I sat there, staring at the screen, wondering how I'd become this blind. How I'd missed the signs. But more than anything, I felt something click into place, something solid. There would be no confrontation yet, no emotional showdown. That would come later. For now, I needed documentation, structure, leverage. I started printing copies, saving files, screenshotting everything. I knew this wasn't just a breakup anymore. It was a strategy meeting. And I was done playing the fool. If she wanted to play games, she'd just stepped into a war she didn't know I was preparing to win. By the end of that week, I had my plan in motion. Quietly, methodically, without a single word to Emma. While she was out meeting friends for her usual midweek brunch, I logged into our joint accounts and transferred the bulk of our savings into a separate bank account under my name only. I left just enough in the joint account to cover the mortgage and utilities for the next month, no more, no less. Then I went after the credit cards. I canceled 2 of them outright, one she'd used primarily for online shopping and business expenses. On the 3rd card, the only one I left active, I set a strict spending limit, $200 per week. Just enough for groceries and basic needs, if she chose to use it wisely. I also enabled real-time alerts for any purchase over $50. I wasn't just cutting off her spending, I was monitoring it. Controlling it? No. Managing it, based on her actual contribution to the household, which by now was exactly 0. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was just leveling the field. If she wanted to live a luxury lifestyle, she could finally learn how to fund it herself. The reaction came faster than I anticipated. That night, I heard the first explosion from the other room, the unmistakable sound of her voice raised in disbelief, followed by the stomp of her feet across the hallway. She stormed into the living room, waving her phone in the air. "What the hell did you do? My card just got declined." Her eyes were wild, her voice high-pitched and brittle. I didn't even stand up from the couch. I just looked her straight in the eye and said calmly, "I adjusted your access to reflect your contribution." For a second, she was speechless. Then came the accusations, loud, erratic, venomous. "You're financially abusive. You're trying to control me. This is toxic masculinity." The irony was almost laughable. This woman, who hadn't paid a single bill in over a year, was now playing the victim because I'd stopped funding her shopping sprees. "Go ahead," I told her. "Tell whoever you want. Explain to them how your husband, who pays every bill, cooks his own meals, and sleeps on the couch, is abusing you by setting a budget." But logic didn't matter to her, not anymore. She wasn't after fairness. She was after control. And I'd just taken it back. After that night, I stopped engaging altogether. Every outburst, every tantrum, every sarcastic remark, I met with silence. But behind that silence, I was working. I began documenting everything. I took photos of the house before I left for work and after I returned, showing the dishes stacked in the sink, laundry untouched, packages still unopened on the porch. I kept digital copies of every receipt I paid for groceries, utilities, repairs. I recorded conversations, discreetly, of course, when she ranted about needing a break from emotional responsibilities or joked about how marriage is just a hustle if you know how to play it right. I wasn't gathering evidence out of spite, I was preparing for the inevitable. I knew now that this wasn't salvageable. Whatever spark we'd once had long turned to ash, buried beneath her entitlement and my silence. But I wasn't going to walk away empty-handed or be labeled the bad guy. I would show, piece by piece, exactly who she had become. And when the time came, I'd have everything I needed, not just to leave, but to walk away with my dignity intact. This wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a case file. And I was building it, one quiet detail at a time. As the days passed, Emma's behavior began to shift, but not in the way I'd hoped. She wasn't softening. She wasn't reflecting. She was unraveling, just enough for me to notice. At first, it was small things. She started staying in more, skipping brunches and spa days. She seemed restless, edgy, nauseous in the mornings. I chalked it up to stress, maybe her lifestyle withdrawals were finally catching up to her. But then came the mood swings. Sharp, unpredictable, and oddly timed. One minute, she was hostile and sarcastic, the next she was overly sweet, almost performative. I didn't say anything. I just watched. Then one afternoon, while she was in the shower, I opened the bathroom cabinet to grab some aspirin, and that's when I saw it. A folded-up piece of tissue paper shoved behind a box of lotion. I unfolded it, and my heart stopped. A positive pregnancy test. 2 bold pink lines. Clear as day. I stood there in silence, staring at it, feeling the ground tilt beneath me. And for the briefest moment, I wondered if it could possibly be mine, if there was some slim, miraculous chance this was the start of something good. But something in my gut told me otherwise. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than a suspicion, I needed proof. That night, while she slept, I accessed her old phone. She'd recently upgraded and left the old one in her drawer, probably assuming I wouldn't think to check it. She'd forgotten to reset it. It still had her messages synced. I scrolled carefully, scanning through dozens of texts, most of which were innocuous, until I saw the thread labeled simply M. My jaw clenched before I even opened it. And there it was, a string of messages between her and Marcus, spanning weeks. Conversations that left nothing to interpretation. "What if it's yours?" she had written. "I'm late. I took a test today." Followed by Marcus's reply, "You said you were on the pill." This wasn't part of the plan. She'd responded with crying emojis, talking about how Jason would never know, how she'd figure it out. But Marcus was panicking, growing colder with each message. He kept saying he wasn't ready for this, that she needed to handle it. That it wasn't his problem. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the final thread snap. Any hope that this was some misunderstanding vanished with each word they'd exchanged. The child wasn't mine. It was his. Over the next few days, things escalated behind the scenes. I didn't say a word to Emma, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. She was more withdrawn, her fake cheerfulness more forced. Then one evening, while I was organizing files in the home office, I overheard a phone conversation through the thin hallway walls. Emma had assumed the shower running would mask her voice, but it didn't. "Marcus, you can't just walk away from this," she hissed. "You're just going to abandon me?" A pause. Then her voice again, quieter, more desperate. "No, I'm not telling Jason yet. I told you, I'm working on it." Another pause. "I just need some money to cover things until I figure it out." It wasn't just betrayal anymore, it was manipulation layered on desperation. I couldn't hear Marcus's words, but her reaction said it all. He wanted out. He was distancing himself, even threatening to expose the situation unless she gave him money, my money. She was cornered, trying to hold it all together with a smile and a silk robe while her little empire collapsed. And I realized then, she wasn't just cheating on me, she was drowning, dragging others down to keep herself afloat. But I wasn't going under with her. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep, curled up in silk sheets she hadn't paid a dime for, I sat in the living room, watching the faint flicker of the hallway light reflecting off the glass of our wedding photo. Something about it made me feel detached, like I was looking at 2 strangers frozen in time, smiling in a life that no longer existed. I didn't waste time with feelings anymore. I opened my laptop and searched for a private attorney, someone experienced, discreet, and ruthless if needed. The next day during my lunch break, I met with her in a quiet office on the edge of town. She was sharp, direct, and didn't sugarcoat anything. "This won't be pretty," she warned, "but it will be thorough. We'll build your case brick by brick." I liked her already. That same evening, I went to the hardware store and installed 2 additional surveillance cameras, one in the living room, another discreetly tucked near the garage door. Not hidden. Just obvious enough to make a statement. When Emma asked about them, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "I want to make sure nothing else goes missing around here." She scoffed and rolled her eyes, but she didn't push further. She didn't know I'd already placed a 3rd camera in the office, just in case. The next few weeks were all about preparation. Every receipt, every screenshot, every recording, meticulously organized and stored in encrypted folders. I backed everything up twice, once on a hard drive, once on a cloud account only I could access. I even printed out physical copies, sealing them in a folder labeled simply, Exit Plan. I documented everything down to the smallest detail, the passive-aggressive comments, the mysterious transactions, the texts between her and Marcus, the late-night phone calls I overheard. My lawyer walked me through every scenario, what the court would ask, what her defense might look like, how to protect my assets and reputation before anything exploded publicly. We prepared a timeline. We mapped out financial records. We built a narrative backed by hard evidence. I wasn't just leaving her, I was constructing a clean, surgical exit. She wouldn't see it coming until it was already done. No drama, no screaming matches, just cold facts, laid out with the precision of a demolition plan. While she kept playing house in her illusion of control, I was quietly laying down the structural beams for my freedom. But I didn't want to just walk away quietly. I wanted truth to be seen, not for revenge, but for closure. I decided there needed to be one final moment, one undeniable unveiling before I left everything behind. So I started planning a family dinner, an event she believed was my olive branch, my way of rebuilding intimacy, as she called it. I let her think she was winning, playing the role of the distant husband coming back to his senses. I told her I wanted both our families together to reconnect, to celebrate a fresh start. She smiled, thinking her charm had finally broken through, unaware that I was already 2 steps ahead. I picked the date, coordinated the guest list, even booked a private dining room at a cozy restaurant she always claimed was beneath her. "Are you sure that place?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. "Trust me," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I want this to feel like a return to our roots." And with that, everything was set. While she planned her outfit, I was planning the reveal. While she rehearsed her smile, I was rehearsing the moment her lies would finally collapse under the weight of undeniable truth. The day of the dinner came sooner than I expected, though by then, everything was in place. I'd sent out the invitations under the pretense of a reconciliation gathering, something to bring the families together, to celebrate new beginnings. My parents were skeptical, but they agreed to show up. Emma's family, on the other hand, was thrilled. Her mother sent a message filled with hearts and exclamation marks, clearly convinced I'd come to my senses. Even her father, usually cold and formal around me, agreed to attend. I booked a private room at the restaurant she once mocked, quaint, affordable, the kind of place that served real food without 3 layers of garnish. I chose it on purpose. I didn't want flair. I wanted truth to take center stage. When I told Emma about the plan, she practically glowed. For the first time in months, she dressed up for me, hairstyled, heels on, makeup flawless. She looked radiant, but all I could see was the lie beneath it all. She leaned in to fix my collar before we left and said, "This is good, Jason. I'm proud of you for trying." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I already knew how the night would end. From the moment we arrived, Emma slipped into performance mode. She greeted her parents with kisses, laughed too loudly, and clung to my arm just enough to keep up appearances. My mother looked uncomfortable, my sister narrowed her eyes, but nobody said anything. The air was thick with politeness, the kind that precedes a storm. We ordered drinks, shared small talk, passed around the bread basket. Emma kept talking about healing energy and restarting our journey, and every time she spoke, I felt the weight of everything I hadn't said growing heavier. When the server stepped out and the last plate was cleared, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. I stood up slowly, clearing my throat, and said, "Before we wrap up tonight, I want to share something. I've put together a little presentation, just a few things I think we all deserve to see." Emma blinked, confused. Her parents looked intrigued. My dad leaned back in his chair. I walked to the corner of the room, plugged the drive into the restaurant's media screen, and hit play. What followed wasn't loud. It wasn't theatrical. It was clinical. Precise. The footage rolled first, Emma and Marcus entering the house while I was at work, caught from multiple angles. Then the screenshots, texts, emails, bank statements, transfers to Marcus's so-called business fund, the positive pregnancy test photo, even audio clips of her late-night conversations. Each file hit the screen like a hammer. At first, there was silence. Then gasps. Emma's mother clutched her chest. Her father turned beet red. My mother looked down. My sister nodded slowly, as if every suspicion she ever had just been confirmed in real time. Emma's smile faded into disbelief, then horror, then denial. "Jason, what is this? What are you doing?" she said, voice trembling. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just looked her in the eye and said, "I'm giving everyone the same clarity I've finally found." The room was frozen. No one spoke. No one moved. The truth hung heavy in the air, undeniable and irreversible. And in that moment, surrounded by two families, I finally felt lighter, because the weight of pretending was no longer mine to carry. The room didn't recover. The silence after the last video clip was deafening, thick with disbelief and shame. Emma's mother looked completely shattered, her carefully styled hair, her elegant demeanor, all crumbling behind a face pale with shock. She kept shaking her head softly, whispering to herself, as if she could somehow rewind what she'd just witnessed. But it was Emma's father who broke first. He stood up slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his suit, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked like it might snap. "Is this true?" he asked Emma, voice low but thunderous in its weight. She stammered, eyes darting from the screen to her family, to me, to the ground. "It's not what it looks like, I can explain." But there was no explanation left that could justify what everyone had seen. Her father didn't wait for more. He turned toward the door and walked out, no words, no goodbye, just the click of his dress shoes fading down the hallway. Her mother followed a moment later, still in a daze. The woman who once boasted about her daughter's success now couldn't even look her in the eye. And then came the final blow, Marcus. He hadn't been at the dinner, of course, but I made sure he wouldn't be spared. As soon as I left the restaurant that night, I called him. I didn't shout. I didn't threaten. I simply told him everything he'd been hiding was no longer a secret, and that I'd already filed a report for identity theft and financial fraud, complete with evidence of his involvement in misusing my accounts and accepting funds under false pretenses. His voice cracked immediately. "Jason, listen, it wasn't like that, man. I didn't mean for it to go that far." He was scrambling now, backpedaling faster than he could form coherent excuses. "Emma said you'd never find out. I thought it was just temporary, just a little help." I cut him off. "You stole from me. You slept with my wife. And now you think I'm going to let you walk away clean?" He begged, pleaded, even offered to pay some of the money back. I let him talk. I wanted him to feel every second of his own collapse. "You're going to be hearing from my lawyer," I said calmly, "and the police. You should start packing. You'll need a lot less in the next place you end up." And with that, I ended the call. No yelling. Just closure. By the time I got home that evening, the storm had passed, but the air still carried the scent of fallout. Emma was already there, slumped in the kitchen, face blotchy from crying, still in the dress she'd worn to the dinner, now wrinkled and pitiful. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand and stopped her. "Don't," I said quietly. "There's nothing left to say." She followed me into the living room anyway, trying to explain, trying to rewrite what everyone had already seen. I stood still, unmoved, arms crossed. And when she finally ran out of breath, I spoke one last time. "You didn't just betray me," I said, my voice steady but cold. "You betrayed trust. You betrayed loyalty. You betrayed the one person who stood by you when no one else would. You broke something that can't be fixed, not because you made a mistake, but because you never valued what you had." She stared at me, tears welling again, but I felt nothing. Not pity. Not rage. Just clarity. I walked past her, straight to the guest room, leaving her in the silence she created, and in that moment, I knew, the rebuild had already begun. The days that followed were exactly what I expected, chaotic, performative, and full of noise that no longer had the power to reach me. Emma tried to rewrite the story almost immediately. She couldn't handle the silence, the judgment, the truth hanging in the air unchallenged. So she did what people like her do, she changed the script. Suddenly, I was no longer the husband who paid the bills, built our life, and supported her through years of excuses. I was emotionally distant, financially manipulative, controlling. She told her friends I had gaslit her for years, that she'd been a prisoner in her own home, that I was toxic and incapable of nurturing a strong, modern woman. The irony made me laugh. The same woman who hadn't worked a day in over a year was now painting herself as the oppressed, independent heroine of a story she'd written in crayon. It wasn't just self-preservation, it was desperation. She knew she'd been exposed, and now the only move she had left was damage control. But I didn't respond. Not publicly. Not privately. I let her talk, let her spin. Because I knew something she hadn't realized yet, truth doesn't need defending. It just needs time. But the mask didn't hold for long. Within days, her own echo chamber started to crack. The same followers who once praised her empowered woman posts began to ask questions. Screenshots leaked. Mutual friends talked. The digital trail she'd ignored, the messages, the photos, the bank transfers, started making rounds in private groups. She tried to delete old posts, block people, even share vague quotes about healing and narcissistic abuse. But people weren't buying it anymore. The comments started changing. Didn't your husband pay for everything? Weren't you the one bragging about soft life while you worked double shifts? Funny how your version of independence was funded by someone else's exhaustion. One by one, the cracks turned into collapses. Sponsors dropped her. Her curated brand image faded. The brunch invites stopped. Even the friends she'd once paraded around began to distance themselves, not because they cared about me, but because her exposure threatened their image too. And that was the final twist in it all. Emma had spent years pretending to be a symbol of modern strength, but the moment the truth came out, she was completely alone. No foundation, no loyalty, just a shell of the persona she created to distract from the person she really was. While she scrambled to salvage her narrative, I was quietly putting the final pieces in place. I met with my lawyer again, handed over the last of the documentation, and initiated the formal divorce process. The house, which she always referred to as our investment, was in my name alone. The assets, savings, even the joint accounts, already separated, already secured. There was nothing left she could take from me. I didn't raise my voice, didn't call her names, didn't argue. I just walked away with the only thing that mattered, my peace. I moved into a new place, a small, quiet house just outside the city, with a little backyard and a garage I actually looked forward to spending time in. I kept my tools, my books, my freedom. That was all I needed. No more drama. No more fake apologies. No more pretending. And the most satisfying part? I didn't have to destroy her. She did it all on her own. All I did was stop protecting the version of her she wanted the world to see. And in doing so, I protected something far more valuable, my self-respect. The new house wasn't much by most people's standards, a modest one-story ranch on the edge of town, with creaky floors, aging paint, and a backyard that needed taming. But to me, it was everything. It was space that didn't carry her perfume in the walls or echoes of arguments in the corners. It was quiet in a way I'd forgotten life could be. I spent the first night there sitting on the back steps with a beer in hand, watching the wind ripple through the tall grass. No designer furniture, no curated candles, no throw pillows that cost more than a week's groceries, just the hum of peace. I could leave my boots by the door without hearing a sigh. I could drink my coffee in silence without being accused of emotional unavailability. It was the first time in years I felt like I wasn't walking on eggshells in my own home. The walls didn't judge me. The air didn't feel heavy. And that simple freedom, of breathing without bracing, was more valuable than any lifestyle I'd ever funded. In that stillness, I began to understand something I'd overlooked for too long: not all power comes from confrontation. Sometimes, silence is the sharpest weapon. I could have fought back harder. I could have screamed, dragged her name through the mud, exposed her deeper to the world. But instead, I let the truth do the work. I realized that walking away with dignity does more damage to a manipulator than any retaliation ever could. Because they expect rage. They feed on chaos. What they don't know how to handle is your absence, your calm detachment, your refusal to play their game. Emma had screamed, posted, begged, twisted stories, and tried everything to pull me back into her orbit. But I stayed still. I stayed quiet. And the silence became my final answer. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because what I'd already lived said enough. My story didn't need to be loud anymore. It just needed to be real. That shift in perspective changed everything. I started waking up early again, not to beat traffic or make deadlines, but to run. To move. To reclaim the body I'd let stress wear down over the years. I cleaned up my diet, joined a local gym, started sleeping better. The physical transformation mirrored the internal one. I was getting lighter, stronger, clearer. And more than anything, I started reconnecting with the people I'd unconsciously pushed away during those years of isolation. Old friends I hadn't seen in ages started reappearing. My buddy Mike, who'd offered his cabin during the worst of it, invited me for weekend fishing trips again. My cousin Alex, not the traitor, but the one who helped me fix up my first truck as a teenager, showed up with a six-pack and didn't ask questions, just sat beside me like nothing had changed. I realized how many bridges I'd unintentionally burned just trying to hold together a marriage that had already crumbled beneath me. And with each conversation, each laugh, each simple act of companionship, I remembered who I was before I became someone else's shadow. I wasn't just recovering, I was rebuilding. Not chasing happiness, but choosing peace. Not proving my worth to anyone, but honoring it myself. It happened when I wasn't looking, when I wasn't trying to fill a void or escape loneliness. It happened on a Sunday afternoon at a neighborhood barbecue hosted by my friend Mike, the same guy who'd handed me his cabin keys when everything fell apart. I almost didn't go. I told myself I was tired, that I needed rest, but the truth was I just didn't feel ready to be around people again, especially couples. But something in me nudged me out the door. Maybe I just needed fresh air and noise that didn't come from inside my own head. I was standing near the grill, sipping a cold beer, when she walked in, Danielle. She wasn't flashy. No staged smiles, no designer bags, no practiced air of superiority. Just jeans, sneakers, a simple ponytail, and a presence that didn't demand attention but still held it. Mike introduced us casually. "Jason, this is Danielle, friend of my wife's. Works night shifts at the hospital, tough as nails." She smiled and shook my hand with a grip that said she was used to holding her ground, not just her coffee. There was no spark, no cinematic slow-motion moment, just a strange, quiet sense of ease. Like maybe, just maybe, I'd stepped into something real. We talked most of the evening, nothing deep, nothing forced. Just two people trading stories about life, work, stubborn coworkers, and the small absurdities that make the days feel a little less heavy. She listened like she actually cared, not like she was waiting for her turn to speak. She didn't ask what I earned or where I lived. She asked what kind of music I liked, if I preferred lakes or mountains, what I cooked when I didn't feel like ordering out. It was light, easy, human. A few days later, I asked if she wanted to grab a bite, nothing fancy, just a local spot near the edge of town where the food was good and the music was low enough to actually talk. When the check came, I reached for it out of habit, but before I could, she slid her card forward. "Split it," she said with a small shrug, like it was no big deal. And that simple gesture stopped me cold. I couldn't remember the last time someone offered to meet me halfway, without conditions, without expectation, without theatrics. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message: I see you, not what you can give me. And I realized in that moment how starved I'd been for mutual respect. It wasn't love at first sight, not the way movies paint it, not some fiery obsession or breathless romance. It was something steadier. Simpler. Real. A quiet respect that didn't need grand gestures or social media captions. With Danielle, I didn't feel like I had to impress or perform. I could just be Jason. Not a provider, not a fixer, not a stepping stone to someone else's lifestyle. Just a man who'd been burned, scarred, but still standing. She didn't try to heal me. She didn't try to dig into my past or play therapist. She just showed up, with her presence, her honesty, and her own scars she didn't try to hide. And in that, I found something I hadn't expected to feel again: ease. Not fireworks. Not fantasy. Just peace. And sometimes, after everything you've been through, that's the rarest and most beautiful thing of all. Sometimes I think back to the man I used to be, the one who came home every night hoping for warmth, holding on to love like it was a duty instead of a choice. I carried the weight of a crumbling marriage because I thought that's what real men did. I thought strength meant endurance. But I've come to learn that strength isn't measured by how much you tolerate, it's measured by how boldly you walk away from what's breaking you. Betrayal doesn't just come from lies or infidelity, it comes from being unseen, unheard, undervalued while giving your all. And the hardest lesson of all? Some people will love what you provide, but never love you. And when that moment comes, when you finally realize it, you've got two choices: keep shrinking to fit someone else's expectations, or stand tall and reclaim your worth. Looking back now, I realize I didn't just walk away from a woman, I walked away from the version of myself that accepted crumbs and called it love. The version that overexplained, overgave, and overcompromised just to keep peace in a war I didn't start. That man was exhausted, hollowed out by the quiet kind of suffering that doesn't leave bruises but scars you all the same. The man I am now? He's not perfect. He's still healing. But he's whole. He stands with dignity, not bitterness. He values respect over attention, peace over approval, and truth over comfort. And if there's one thing I hope every man reading this remembers, it's this: you don't need to burn yourself out to keep someone else warm. Sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's the first real act of power. Would you like me to now wrap this into a final audience engagement, close with a thought-provoking question and powerful CTA message? I'm ready when you are. And now, I want to ask you something, not just as a narrator of this story, but as a man who's lived it. What would you do if your partner withheld love, but demanded luxury? What if you were showing up every day, working, building, giving, sacrificing, while the person beside you only showed up when it benefited them? What if your loyalty was being taken for granted, your presence treated like a utility, and your love returned with entitlement? At what point do you stop begging for appreciation and start demanding respect, not through words, but through action? At what point do you stop fighting for someone, and start fighting for yourself? Every man has a threshold, a breaking point that defines not just his limits, but his identity. Some realize it early. Others, like me, carry the weight until it nearly breaks them. But when that moment comes, when your soul whispers that you deserve more, you owe it to yourself to listen. Because no amount of loyalty will ever fix someone who only sees your worth in what you provide, not who you are. So here's the truth. Sometimes your greatest strength isn't in staying, but in leaving with your head held high. It's not about revenge, not about bitterness, it's about clarity. Dignity. Growth. The world teaches men to endure. To provide. To keep pushing even when our tanks are empty. But strength isn't measured by how long you suffer in silence, it's measured by how boldly you reclaim your peace. Never fund someone's fantasy while they deny your reality. Never sacrifice your self-worth for a love that only values what's in your wallet, not what's in your heart. You are not just a paycheck. You're not a placeholder. You're not an accessory to someone else's image. You are a man, worthy of loyalty, effort, partnership, and respect. If you've made it this far, maybe this story hit a little too close to home. And if it did, I hope you take this as more than entertainment. I hope you take it as a mirror, a wake-up call, a moment of truth. And now, I'll leave you with one final thought. When the love is gone, and only the cost remains, will you keep paying for someone else's comfort, or finally invest in your own freedom? Let me know in the comments, what would you do? If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share it with a brother who needs to hear this. Because sometimes, just one story can help a man see his worth again. End of story. Would you like me to now compile the entire story in one cleaned, formatted file, or prepare a YouTube description with SEO-rich text and thumbnail caption ideas? Just say the word, I'm ready to help you bring this to life professionally.